Sot përpara se të ftojmë folësin son Sendi, bashkë me Sendin kemi një grup tjetër I cili është shoqërohet, një grup në Amerika të cilët gjatë kësaj jave kanë qenë duke folur me grupe të ndryshme, interesin në Shqipëri. Edhe unë thjesht dua ti prezantoj juve që ju të keni një ide edhe mund të jetë I lidhur me fushën në cilën ju jeni duke punuar. Edhe në fund të kësaj mbrëmje ju mund të takoni një nga këta persona, mund të keni pyetje dhe mund pse jo të lini edhe një kafe në ditën në vazhdim. Kështu që grupi ka ardhur në Amerika, I pari është Tom, po, mund të ndrysh Tom. Tom, ai është ka qenë tani, në fakt në fillim të këtij viti ka qenë presidenti I një kompanie në Amerikë, në fakt sapo e ka shitur kompaninë është të tërhequr, por ai ka qenë presidenti dhe pronari I kësaj kompanie The Builder Partners, në përgjithësi në fushën e materialeve të ndërtimit edhe në shtetin e Georgias në Amerikë. Kështu që për gjithë ata që kanë interes në këtë fushë, Tomi ja ku është mund të flisni në fund takimit. Tjetri është Steve Daniel. Steve. Edhe Steve është bashkëthemeluesi I një kompanie të madhe në Amerikë edhe në përgjithësi në fushën elektrike. Të një firmë inxhinierike edhe e lidhur ka fokus në Shtetet e Bashkuara dhe në Amerikë. Por nëse ka inxhinierat në këtë fushë, jeni mirëpritur në fund takoni Steve. Kemi një çift këtu, është Joshua dhe Christine King. Joshua, edhe Joshua është ai është ushtarak, por gjithashtu është I fokusuar duke qenë ka një diplomë në psikologji dhe është këshilltar në fusha të ndryshme dhe në grupe të ndryshme. Mirë se ka ardhur Joshua. Edhe nëse e ti, ajo është veterinere, doktoresh, nuk besoj është këtu, është diku atje në fund. Kristin. Okej, pastaj kemi një çift tjetër, Armando Kurili, edhe nëse e ti Mary J. Nga emri mund të kuptoni Armando, që është pekoqe. Dhe Armando ka më shumë 20 e disa vite në Amerikë, në Michigan. Ai punon në Universitetin e Michiganit, në specialitetet e mjekësisë, edhe ka një kurikulum të gjerë, në kërkime që ai bën atje, por dëshira e tij bashkë me nusën e tij Mary Jane është të ndihmojnë shqiptarët në Michigan. Ata janë shumë të fokusuar nusa e tij me gratë atje, këshillimin e çifte, por janë gjithmonë atje duke mirëpritur emigrantët shqiptarë që vënë në Michigan. Kështu që vetë shumë faleminderit të dyve për gatishmërinë për ndihmuar shqiptarët atje. Ja ku janë. Gjithashtu kemi Stu, është këtu, ai është ushtarak karriere, ka qenë në ushtri për një kohë gjatë, tani është në fushën e biznesit, këshillimit, edhe ka ardhur bashkë me Sendin, folsin sot. Dhe I fundit Tom Miller, Tom është këtu, ai është Executive Director I Momentum Europe quhet, është një grup I cili në fakt ai ka sjellë folsin dhe grupin sot këtu, domethënë. Edhe ka qef Shqipërinë, ka ardhur disa herë, ka 4 vite rresh gjoja dhe një nga stafi I tij është shqiptar, ai shumë ka qef Shqipërinë. Kështu që mirë se erdhe. Mirë, tani së fundi do prezantoj folsin sot. Sandy Shugart, Stanford ka, por I pëlqen të themi shkurt Sandy. Sandy është presidenti I Universitetit e Kolegjit Valencia në Orlando, Florida, që nga viti 2000, domethënë 19 vite. Ai është botues libras, poet, ka shkruar këngë, ai është shumë I përkushtuar mësimdhënies, ka një PhD në mësimdhënie nga Universiteti I North Carolinas. E ka shumë për zemër të jetë ndihmë për studentëve, por gjithashtu edhe grupeve tjera interesit, edhe ka bërë goxha studime në fushën e udhëheqësisë. Edhe libri i tij, udhëheqësia në formal të jetës, sapo është përkthyer në shqip, edhe shpresoj që shumë për ju do keni mundësi ta keni. Ai disi në temën sot do flasi duke referuar librit, disa nga gjërat kryesore, por do ta ftoj Sendin për këtë pjesë të parë. Mirë se vjen Sandy, hajde. Ne tani presim.
Time to go? Yeah. All right.
Ai ka dhe një surprizë për ne, unë përmenda që është poet edhe do që ta filloj këtë kohë me një këngë.
Good evening. How are you? How are you? That's better. That's better. So you kind of came to hear a lecture, PowerPoint and slides and content, and there's a problem with PowerPoint. The problem with PowerPoint is that it's powerless and pointless. So we are going to talk with you for a few minutes tonight in two talks, so you get a chance to stretch your legs and visit and come talk to us one-on-one, but two short talks. I'm actually trained as a brain scientist. That's my background. And I happen to know that your brain isn't paying attention most of the time. And after about 10 or 12 minutes, it's not paying attention at all. Unless something happens to wake it up in a song or a story, sometimes a joke, a disaster on stage, all these things will get your attention. So we're going to hope that it's a song or two and not a disaster on stage. So we've written some songs and found some songs that will help a little bit with today's message about being, I would say, being whole at work. Being whole at work, right? So the first is just a warm-up. This song could be, it isn't, but it could be the national hymn, the national song of Albania. It's called Saint Caffeine. I seen the light, oh the light I seen. Seen the light of Saint Caffeine. Of other drugs, oh I am clean. I pray to you, Saint Caffeine. Yes, I am a legal fiend. It's my high in the mean routine. Cola nut or coffee bean. Pray to you, Saint Caffeine. Play, Stu. While my hormones fill up my jeans, but ever since my sleep grew lean, pray to you, Saint Caffeine. You get me through the morning, get me to the afternoon. Feeling calm is so boring, I'd be snoring without you. I wear your ring around my cup. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having fun, and especially having fun when you're worked all day and you came out to an event and you thought, oh, why did I agree to do this? But here you are, so we might as well have some fun. So there's a long tradition of songs and poems about work. It makes sense if you think about it. We spend most of our waking lives working. We do. And work influences almost everything we do. And so there's a long, long tradition of writing songs about it. Here's an example of a little one. It has not so much to do with tonight, but it's a part of an American tradition of songs. You may have experienced this in your own culture. Every so often, something changes, technology changes, and everything turns over, and a lot of people's jobs go away. We're at a time right now where people are talking about that happening soon. Things like cars and trucks that drive themselves. I don't know about you, I'm not real comfortable with that idea yet, especially in Tirana. Although I suppose it couldn't be much worse. We were riding in the other day. I never thought I'd see this. We were riding through the heaviest possible traffic, going through one of those traffic circles where people were not going in a circle. And a guy passed us on one of those little scooters, driving his scooter and texting at the same time. And I thought, he must be full of faith. So this song comes from a time in the past when what they're saying is about to happen to us now is going to happen. It's called Eragon Mill, and it's about a time in the past when the textile industry, blankets and cotton sheets and clothing and so on, which had, in the 19th century, 18th, 19th century, it had been mostly in England. And then in the mid-19th and late 19th century, it moved to New England. And then in the early 20th century, it moved to the southern United States. In places like where I'm from, North Carolina, the largest employers in most of the little towns were cotton mills, where they made blankets and sheets and pillowcases and socks. And they're all gone. And that all happened in about 20 years when they moved overseas again. And this is a song that comes from that era called Eragon Mill. At the east end of town, at the foot of a hill, there's a chimney so tall that says Eragon Mill. But there's no smoke at all coming out of that stack. The mill has pulled out and it ain't coming back. And the only sound I hear is the sound of the wind as it blows through the town. Weave and spin, weave and spin. There's no children at all in the narrow, empty streets. Looms have all gone. It's so quiet I can't sleep. Now I'm too old to change, and I'm too young to die. There's no place to go for I, woman, and I. And the only sound I hear is the sound of the wind as it blows through the town. Weave and spin, weave and spin. Now the mill has shut down. It's the only sound I know. Tell me, where will I go? Tell me, where will I go? And the only sound I hear is the sound of the wind as it blows through the town. Weave and spin, weave and spin. Yeah, the only sound I hear is the sound of the wind as it blows through the town. Weave and spin, weave and spin. Just one more song. Is that okay? Just one more. This is this is one I wrote a few years ago when I was feeling it at work. Feeling it at work. So work can be wonderful from time to time, but it also takes something from us, and hence the title of tonight's conversation. There are times in your life when it feels like magic. You go to work and you think, I'm doing just what I was made to do, and it's making a difference in the world, and it's making a difference for me, and I'm doing it with people I love, and life couldn't get any better. But it's rare. It's rare. A lot of people experience work as misery, as labor, as a grind. Some of them bring that with them wherever they go. But lots of times it's just in the nature of the work and in the nature of the organization we work in. And very often you discover that young in your career. So here you are, most of you, one or two of you are getting up in age like me, but most of you are young professionals who are still finding the long trajectory, the arc of your working life and career. And you may be in a place where you're not real excited about the prospects right now. It may not look all that hopeful. And you're wondering, is this all there is? Is this it? Really? So here's a little song I wrote about that. One of the phrases we use to describe that kind of work, drudgery, is a rat race. Do you know that? Does that sound familiar to you? Rat race. So I asked the question, if work is a rat race, where did all the rats come from? It's a little loud. Let me fix that. Keep playing. Keep playing. Attaboy, Stu. Climbing the ladder, we all know the drill. Things will be different when you're king of the hill. Oh, when you first got started, well, you took it on the chin. But business is business, now you'll do what will win. You may win the rat race, you may win all that. You may win the rat race, but you'll still be a rat. You will still be a rat. You say to me, don't worry, 'cause it's all part of the game. But it's a full contact sport, someone always goes home lame. You used to be a nice guy, now that's all in the past. 'Cause you'd rather be on top, the nice guys always finish last. You may win the battle, you may win the war, you may win the battle, but you'll still be a bore. You will be a big successful bore. You think you're in control, making every move. What you do not know is the game is playing you. If you got what it takes, you're hoping for a call. What you do not know is we're going to lose it all. Lose it all. So, sorry. You may win the rat race. You may win all that. You may win the rat race, but you'll still be a rat. You will still be a rat. You will still be a rat. Go ahead and sit down. Well, that's fun. That's fun. That's fun. I think I've got 2 microphones going here. You leave that one on too. There we go. Got 2 microphones going on here, so the lady in back can interpret to those of you who need the headsets. If that's not working, let me know, and I'll do what all Americans do when they're talking to someone in a different language. I'll talk louder. Sorry, just kidding. So work. How do you think about the way you engage your work? So I need to tell you my story just briefly. I've been 38 years now in senior management in billion-dollar organizations. And so I've learned a lot. Some of it the hard way, some of it, people taught me and made it easy. But this is who I am, and I've lived there for a long time. And I did not expect it. I wasn't interested in pursuing leadership. I wasn't interested in being in charge of anything. I didn't have a lot of ambition growing up. I mostly was curious. I liked music and poetry and history and science. I studied chemistry in college. I went on to become a cognitive neuroscientist, not because I wanted a job, but because I was really interested in it. I was just interested. And somehow I stumbled into these big jobs. And it happened almost overnight. I can remember being called over to the president's office of a billion-dollar, multi-leveled bureaucracy, a big business. He called me to his office and said, I'd like for you to be on my team. And I said, well, gosh, I wasn't thinking about looking for a job even. And he said, yeah, I know that. That's one of the reasons I like the idea of you being on my team, he said. And I said, well, what'd you have in mind for me to do? And he said, well, there's 2 jobs available. One is special assistant to the president, and that's what I had in mind for you. And I said, well, what would I do? He said, well, write speeches and do policy analysis and help me figure out, complicated decisions. I said, well, that sounds like fun. I said, what's the other job? And he said, well, vice president. And with a little bit of hubris and a lot of ignorance, I said, well, I think I'd rather do that. And he looked at me for a minute and said, well, okay. And I was hired. I was 25. Yeah, I had hundreds of staff, thousands of staff, big budgets. But mostly I was in this organization, a big institution. You know what they're like, right? Lots of layers of people, lots of politics going on all the time, people forming alliances and power grabs and lots of rumors and talking behind people's back, power moves, politics. So I came to work at this place knowing I wasn't going to have a good day. I was in trouble. I'd been thrown into the deep end of the pool and somebody had put sharks in there. And I thought, well, I can't lead here based on my technical knowledge because I'm so young and I've done so little. I can't tell any of these people what to do. Only thing I can do is lead by principle. And so I thought, that's what I'll do. So when every problem came up, I was the guy in the room who said, well, let's talk about the principles we want to be reflected in our decision and how they'll be reflected that way. I was the one who managed to call them back to first things. Even when it was obvious to everybody else in the room, the thing to do is X. Let's do X. And they had almost complete consensus, they thought. And I would stop the conversation and say, well, I'd like to understand why X is the right thing to do and what principles are at work in that. And as they began to unpack what was behind it, it turned out there were people in the room who didn't agree with X, but didn't have any voice. They were fearful, or they were in the wrong group, or they were the wrong gender, or they hadn't worked there long enough, or whatever. And they began to speak up. And we began to develop a community of work around being explicit on the principles for the decisions we were making. And it was going great. And I was learning really fast. And after about the second or third year, instead of being fired, which is what everybody expected, I was the golden boy. I was the up-and-comer. He's going to be something one of these days. He's awesome. I probably listened to it a little bit and got a big head. And then one day, one of the most important things in my life happened. One of the two or three. I'll tell you about all of them before the night's over. But this really important thing happened. It happened in a staff meeting, in the time-honored tradition of staff meetings. Senior staff around the table doing business, way too many items on the agenda, couldn't possibly give them thoughtful attention. Everybody knew who was sitting in the power seat and who wasn't. You know what I mean. And I was good at this stuff. I had learned the skills of organizational politics. You know those, right? When to keep your mouth shut, make people think you agree with them when you really don't. When to speak up because you've already got the power lined up. When to withhold information because information is power. When to release information to pay off a debt, to earn a green stamp, we call it. All those little tricks that people learn to do in organizational life to survive. I'd gotten good at them. So here we are in this meeting playing those games. And here's what happened. I hurt somebody. I hurt somebody at the table. A person I actually cared for quite a bit. She was a wonderful woman, bright. I don't know what I did now, it's so long ago. Maybe I withheld some information from her that would have helped her a lot in the meeting. And she discovered that I had laid an ambush for her. Or maybe I proved that I was smarter than she was by unpacking her logic in front of everybody. Knowing me, probably what I did was I made a wisecrack trying to make everybody laugh. I just went for a laugh. I get in trouble doing that all the time. And I touched her in some place that was infinitely more sensitive than I could have imagined. And I hurt her. Now, it happens to all of us. It happens in meetings all the time. Meetings can be dangerous. That's why we keep our head down. And she gave me this great favor, a wonderful gift. Instead of just swallowing it and acting like nothing happened, and maybe going home and kicking the dog, instead she followed me back to my office. And she closed the door behind her, and she let me have it with both barrels. You're not who you think you are. You're not who you say you are. Let me show you who you really are. And she held up a mirror to me. And I was shocked. She was absolutely right. All I could do was apologize. And I went home to think about it over the weekend. I really thought about quitting. Because here's what I discovered in that moment, in that gift. It's not just that I wasn't who I said or thought I was. It's that I was becoming somebody I didn't want to be. And it was happening to me at work through success. You see, what we do every day, and the tools we use to do it, and the habits of thought we cultivate while we do it, those things are working on us. You're formed more powerfully by your work than you form it. It's in human nature to think we're in charge. I got it. I'm in charge. I'm in control. It's my life, my job. I got it. No, you don't. It's got you. It's got you. And I realized as I thought about it over the weekend that the people I didn't particularly respect, the old burned out husks of human beings that were hanging around the margins of our organization because they'd been there forever, didn't start out that way. They started out just like me. And the pressure and the reactivity and stress stuff at work had finally worn them into somebody else and twisted their character around. Now, my first calling in the world is as a poet. And so I think in metaphors all the time, and I write all the time. I do my work in journals. And the metaphor that came to me for this came out of my background as a chemist. Right? It's called a crucible. In chemistry, any chemists here? Anybody do chemistry? A few, yeah? Yeah, and some of you do lab work. So chemistry, a crucible is this ceramic bowl that you do reactions in that are so powerful they would shatter an ordinary Pyrex flask. Right? There's too much heat. There's too much pressure. There's too much reactivity. There might be corrosive byproducts. That's a crucible. And I thought, yeah, heat, reactivity, pressure, corrosive byproducts, staff meeting. Get it? It occurred to me that although work is sometimes wonderful, sometimes it's awful, like a crucible. And you can't avoid it. All places where human beings gather to cooperate, all human beings experience this. It's called friction. We rub up against each other. And our organizations get twisted and weird. And they hurt people. They consume them. And I knew that if I didn't do something radical and soon, that I was headed towards a twisted character. I was going to be somebody I didn't want to be. So I began looking, how can I be responsible in the world and not be ruined? Now that was the question of a 28-year-old. Fortunately, somebody said, you know, it's not all about you. And the second insight was, as a leader, I made other people's crucibles. That really got my attention. To be responsible for wrecking other people's lives and characters by the irrational power and stuff that happens in ordinary human institutions and organizations and businesses. That's a scary prospect for me. So I got really serious about looking for a solution to this, how I could be responsible and not ruined. And sure enough, the metaphor changed like they are supposed to. A good metaphor shifts. And I remembered that crucible had an older meaning from the first human technology, right? You probably studied in school about the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age, you know about the Bronze Age, right? When people could fabricate metal tools. So here's how that works. You find copper, usually in a matrix of rock, and you heat it up to 900 degrees Celsius, and the copper melts out of the rock. And you heat it up in a crucible. You know, if there's a little bit of the element tin, stannous tin, whatever you call it, in the rock, it alloys the liquid copper into bronze. And bronze is really useful because it's harder than copper, and you can put an edge on it, and you can make a plow, or a hoe, or a sword, or a sickle, or a knife, or a hatchet. Useful tools. And I thought, what if going into the crucible, instead of being deforming and miserable, could be formative? That being there would make me more useful in the world. And that if I could help shape other people's crucibles, when they came to work, instead of going home depleted, they went home nourished. Who wouldn't want to go to a place of work where you came home at the end of the day enlarged instead of diminished, and encouraged instead of beat down, and hopeful instead of dreadful? That's the vision of work that I was carrying around, still carry around. How do we do that? Human beings are amazingly creative in the right environment. There's hardly anything we can't do if the environment's right. But the environment's so wrong most of the time. So I began looking for that. What does that? And then the metaphor shifted again. And I learned another meaning of crucible. I read a little book, a wonderful little novel called The Alchemist. Anybody know this book? Yeah? How do you pronounce his name? Pablo Coelho? Coelho, okay. Wonderful little book. Alchemy. This is a medieval tradition. It's kind of a mixture of philosophy and science and magic. In alchemy, the idea is that if you could find the rarest of all substances in the universe, called the Philosopher's Stone, which represents wisdom, and you heated a little Philosopher's Stone with a base or ignoble metal. Get the language? Does that translate? An ignoble metal in a crucible. The Philosopher's Stone would transform the base metal into a noble metal, like gold or silver. I thought, oh man, what if going to work wasn't just about misery, and it wasn't just about being formed and made more useful by the challenge? What if it was actually transforming? What's the Philosopher's Stone? That's the quest. At work, what's my Philosopher's Stone? How can I be whole? How can I grow in my wholeness? How can I help other people be whole in what they do, as imperfect as human beings are? That's the Philosopher's Stone, is what I was looking for. What is it? I should stop here and say, well, that's the second conversation. Leave you hanging. But I won't. I'll answer the question for me. Here's what I discovered. My most important work, the work I should do first, before any other work, the work I must not neglect at peril of my soul, isn't my work in the world. It's my work in here. It's my interior work. Every human being is made to do it. It's a unique capacity. As far as we know, no other creature has a conscience. No other creature can reflect on their own health, morality, purpose, mission, value. It's a unique capacity, I think, given to us by God. It couldn't have evolved. As a scientist, as a brain scientist, I'm telling you, there's no evolutionary pathway to create this. I've spent my whole career in debates about whether there's such a thing as mind or not. And I just have to tell you, there is. And it's like this. That's why you must attend, yes, to your mind, yes, to your body, and yes, to your soul. This is soul work. And what you do, what I do, and what I've learned to do, it took years to figure out how to do this, and it's hard to teach it to other people, is I go to my workshop every day, sometimes more than once, and I take the raw material that I've been living out in my life at work into the workshop, and I work on it. It's mostly hard questions that I ask myself. Why am I envious of her? Why did I feel so compelled to persuade him? Why do I want their approval? What am I afraid of in this situation? If I didn't have fear, what would I really try to accomplish here? There's a million questions. Some of them are stupid and banal, because I am. And some of them are huge, cosmic almost. The Philosopher's Stone is to do your interior work and connect it to your exterior work. So what I do in the world is an extension of who I'm choosing to become. And there's this conversation that occurs, exterior to interior, to exterior to interior. And over time, when people recognize that what they call it is integrity. That's a botanical term. It means connectedness in its root. That my interior self and my exterior self are connected. They're the same. I'm not a person pretending for you, and a person pretending for you, and a person pretending for me, and here 3 different persons, 4 different persons, 5 different persons. I'm not a role I play. I had to learn to be all of me, all of the time. That's why I sing when I talk. It's a big important part of me. If I neglected it, I wouldn't be me up here. I'd be somebody else. So, this is the philosopher's stone. I want to sing one more song to close this section. And we can talk, if you'll come back after coffee and whatnot, we'll talk a little more in detail about what this really means in practice. And I'll be happy to engage you in conversation about that. Practically, your situation, my situation. Now, I've noticed, I've only been here a few days, but different cultures have different levels of comfort with asking a question in a big group. So if you're comfortable with that, you want to come back and talk, stand up and ask your question. If you're not, and you want to write something down and pass it to one of these guys in the front here, and just say, what about this? I'll be happy to try to respond to that. I'm no genius, and I'm not magic, and I won't know all the answers, but I can tell you one fellow traveler to another, how I've experienced it, and we can compare notes on the road. How about that? That'd be okay? Will you come back? Yeah. Okay. So this is a song I'm singing to you. I haven't sung it in a long time because I wrote it back when I was experiencing all these things. You want to do it in F? We'll do it in F. It's capo 2, right? No, that's E. 3. Yeah. There, that's better. This is the metaphor behind this. You may use this phrase. I won't explain it if you do. You ever say, I've got a lot of irons in the fire? You ever say that? It's a cowboy saying. It means I'm really, really busy. I got too many priorities right now. Don't bother me. Got a lot of irons in the fire. It comes from branding cattle. Cowboys would brand cattle. If they had too many irons going at once, they would lose control of their process there. And it just kind of came into common use. Sorry. Stop buzzing. There. Got a job you might envy, a business on the side. Do it for the money, do it for the pride. Pay a ton of alimony, got children out of town. When neither of us did much wrong, the loving just wound down. And I know every major airport like a shallow, worn-out friend. My laptop and my cell phone, they keep my life plugged in. And of course, sometimes I wonder what it all comes to. but I have no time to wander looking for some final truth. You see, I got a lot of irons in the fire. New car, new apartment, new big screen stereo, new health club and new broker. Just the basics, don't you know? 'Cause a man makes an impression, he's a loser or success in the first 15 minutes, by his look, his style, his dress. And I've always been a winner. Say, wouldn't Dad be proud? A proven performer, a leader in the crowd. And of course, sometimes I wonder what it all comes to, but I have no time to wander looking for some final truth. You see, I got a lot of irons in the fire. No time for the questions in the silence all alone. I've got goals and aspirations, things to see, to do, to own. But I hear a distant calling, some song I used to know, like someone's waiting for me in a place that I can't go. And it's off this major highway, down a narrow lane. I fear that I'll get trapped there and lose everything I've gained. And of course, sometimes I wonder what it all comes to, but I have no time to wander looking for some final truth. You see, I got a lot of irons in the fire. Yeah, I got a lot of irons in the fire. I got a lot of irons. Thank you. We'll see you after the break, okay? To get us settled down again, this isn't one of my songs, but it's one I love to sing. It's an old Guy Clark song called Stuff That Works. Imagine you're in a honky-tonk in Texas. I got an old blue shirt, it suits me just fine. I like the way it feels, so I wear it all the time. I got an old guitar, won't ever stay in tune. I like the way it sounds in a dark and empty room. I got an old pair of boots and they fit just right. Well, I can work all day and I can dance all night. I got an old used truck and it runs just like a top. Get the feeling it ain't ever gonna stop. Stuff that works, stuff that holds up, the kind of stuff that don't hang on the wall, stuff that's real, stuff you feel, the kind of stuff you reach for when you fall. Y'all clap for my friend Stu. I got a pretty good friend who's seen me at my worst. He can't tell if I'm a blessing or a curse, but he always shows up when the chips are down. That's the kind of stuff I like to keep around. Well, stuff that works, stuff that holds up, the kind of stuff you don't hang on the wall, stuff that's real, stuff you feel, kind of stuff you reach for when you fall. Can you sing that with us real quick? Stuff that works, stuff that holds up, stuff that holds up. You do it. The kind of stuff you don't hang on the wall, stuff that's real, stuff you feel. Stuff you reach for when you fall. Got a woman I love, she's crazy and paints like God. She's got a playground sense of justice, won't take odds. I got a tattoo with her name right through my soul. Think everything she touches turns to gold. Stuff that works, stuff that holds up, the kind of stuff you don't hang on the wall, stuff that's real, stuff you feel, the kind of stuff you reach for when you fall. One more time. Stuff that works, stuff that holds up, the kind of stuff you don't hang on the wall, stuff that's real, stuff you feel, the kind of stuff you reach for when you fall. That's good enough for now. I feel like we have more to talk about. Do you feel that way? More to talk about? Yes. Okay. Can you hear me if I walk over here or not? I don't think you can. I need to stay here. Okay. I'm not a stay still kind of guy, but I'll do my best. So, we were a little theoretical there. You were just hearing about doing your internal work, your interior work. They're turning this on? No? Some sort of lie detector. So we were just talking about being whole at work and finding a way to do your interior work. So let's take it back to practical matters. How do you practice this? What difference does it make on the job? All those sorts of things. And I would tell you that I go to work on Monday morning just like you do. Sometimes earlier, sometimes later. I come home late at night just like you do. Sometimes my family's awake and sometimes they're not. I've tried to create boundaries, but I have the kind of job where it's hard to do. But I do my best. I'm married for 41 years. I have 4 children. The youngest is 20, the oldest is 33. They only come home when they need money now. Or a little loving, and that's okay. My parents and my wife's mother live with us. She lives in the house with us. They've been in and out. Right now they're in nursing care. We just moved so we could be real close to the nursing home and see them every day. So I and my wife tag team that. She probably goes to see them more than I do because they always call her. I don't know why they don't call me. They call her. And she goes to take care of what's ever going on. So we have this kind of expansive family, and it's such a blessing to be a part of all that. And then we have extended family, not the kind that, like cousins and uncles and aunts and all that. We have those. But we have an extended family of people who just need to be somewhere and don't have a place to be, and it's been our family's habit to have a place for people to be. So right now at my house, there's a family of 4 living upstairs. We're not sure how long. They're between houses. I won't say they're homeless. They're between houses. And he works. They have a baby who's a month old and a baby who's 13 months old. And wow, I'd forgotten what that was like. But there they are. So we have a life at home. It's not like I've given up home life to do work. But work for me is still hugely important, even here towards the last third of my career. Or maybe the last 6th or the last 12th. I'm not sure yet. But I'm getting close to the end of punching a clock so that I can spend more time with young people, loving on them, counseling them, listening to them mostly, as they wrestle with the same things I wrestled with when I was their age, how to be whole at work. So what are some of the challenges you face at work? What are the things you have to learn to do? So there's a book floating around. We'll give a few of them away later. You're welcome to it. It's really about doing that interior work. And most of the truths I know have some paradox associated with them. So I've written essays about how I experienced that at work. For example, it's really, really important to learn how to listen. Listening is your most powerful communication tool. First, you learn to listen to the people close to you in your life. And then you go to work and you have to learn to listen all over again to people who are not necessarily connected to you, don't already love you. And if you're in leadership, you've got to learn to listen to people who are afraid to speak to you, or afraid they might be misunderstood, or that they might somehow compromise their future. But you learn to listen. Now, listening, like all leadership, listening is mostly character, only a little bit technique, right? Has anybody ever taken a class in listening? You ever taken one? We used to teach them. I used to teach them. Used to be a big deal. This is before most of you were born. In the 70s, when I was a young professional, we taught seminars on listening. But you know how to do this. So I'm going to give you a seminar on listening. You ready for it? This is a 3-minute seminar on how to be a better listener. First, please look at me in my eyes. This is where I am. I'm right here. When I'm speaking to you, I'd like to make eye contact with you. I'd just assume you weren't looking over my shoulder to see if someone more important than me was behind me. Look at me. Second, let me finish what I'm saying before you start talking. Now, I've observed in Albania that sometimes everybody talks at once. I get that. That's a cultural thing. But when you're at work dealing with somebody and you pass that off as, oh, it's just our culture, you may well have hurt somebody. You may well have cut somebody off who needed to speak to you. And you think it was, oh, it's just what we do. No. Let them finish. Be distinctive that way. While they're talking to you, concentrate on understanding what they're saying, not what you're going to say next. Confirm your understanding of what they're saying. I hear you saying that I should get on with this. Right? Ask leading questions. Tell me why you feel that way. I'd like to know more about that. Not judging statements, questioning statements, inquiry. Invite people to say more. Tell me more about that. I'm not sure I understand that fully. I'd really like to understand that. Most people, if you understand them too quickly, believe you don't really understand them. Even if you do, let them tell you more. You may find that they're telling you the opposite of what you think they are. That happens to me all the time. It took me years in our long marriage to learn that my interpretation of my wife speaking and her interpretation of her speaking were not always identical. That what she said and what I heard weren't always the same thing. And there's a way of dealing with that. Tell me more. Open body posture. This invites conversation, doesn't it? This is my bad habit. You do this too? I've got an excuse. I have a perfect little shelf for holding my arms. I feel like I ought to use it. But this is a bad habit. Right? There are about 20 of these little techniques I can teach you, all of which will make you a better listener, number one. They will also make you appear to be a better listener, both. And people will respond to that. It's just technique. Here's what I can't teach you. Not in 20 minutes, maybe not in 20 years. I can't teach you that annoying you-know-what at the end of the table, who always says this stupid stuff at this point in the meeting and behaves in this stupid way and bothers everybody, might be worth listening to. Might have something to say that you need to hear. See, hearing that isn't a matter of technique. It's a matter of humility. And humility isn't technique, it's character. It's character. Now, character, you're not born with character. You're kind of born a blank slate with regard to character. You develop your character over time. And it can change. Just as mine was threatening to change early in my career to be awful. It can get bad, it can get better. But it happens really slowly. I would say at the same rate of a glacier changing, except now the glaciers are changing really fast. It's slow. It's about reflection on experience. That's what changes character. And actually, when you go to your interior workshop, that's mostly what you're working on. You think you're working on the next thing, the issue at hand, what you're really working on is your character. And over time, as your character becomes more intentional, then a lot of things you do get better. You do them better out of habit. You don't even have to think about them. If you cultivate humility and listening, and you're genuinely humble towards other people, your technique doesn't matter much anymore. You're naturally going to invite conversation. People will engage. And what's the number one challenge for work organizations right now? Number one, it's not finances. It's not supply of labor. It's not a marketing plan. It's not strategy. You know what the number one challenge for all workplaces is? Disengagement. They did a survey just about a month and a half ago in England. It's 400,000 workers. 50% of them responded to the survey that they were either totally disengaged or close to totally disengaged at work. 47% of them said, I have no hope that it'll get better. It's the number one challenge at work. Our work organizations aren't failing because they're not smart enough. They're failing because we've created an environment where people just disengage. Think about that for a minute. How many people do you know in your place of work and you wonder, why don't they care? Why don't they care like I care? I care. Why don't they care? Somebody should fire those non-caring people. Get them out of here. It's not much of a solution. I mean, sometimes it's the only solution. But if you replace them with people who are also alienated or become alienated by the environment they're working in, you're just moving the problem around. You're not solving it. The first step in establishing engagement is listening, real listening. So I told you, there's just one example of how the interior workshop changes what you do every day. Now, most truths, I told you, also are kind of paradoxical. They have a flip side. Here's a flip side. There's times when you shouldn't listen. And you should cover your ears and say, I'm not listening to that. It's happened to me. It's not as often, but once in a while. How many of you have ever been a performer of any kind? Singer, dancer, actor, speech giver? Have you been on stage? Kind of scary, isn't it? Kind of scary. The surveys say the number one fear of public people, this has been true for 50 years, when they ranked their fears, number one fear, public speaking. Public speaking. Let me tell you, it's a lot scarier to sing than to play a guitar. Right? And I'm scared every time. Because there's a voice back here. It's sort of like a sock puppet. And the voice says, you're no good. Why should they listen to you? That was awful. You stink. And almost every creative thing I do, and I do a lot of things, I write poetry, I write fiction, I make music, I write songs, I've written a movie score. In every one of those projects, my enemy wasn't writer's block. My enemy was self-doubt. Right? And sometimes the voices don't come from here. Sometimes voices out there join the voice back here. So you've decided to try something really bold. You're convinced it's the right thing to do. You've tested the idea with people. You've got a following for this work. We're going to go do this. I know nobody else does it quite this way. It's not a best practice, but we're going to try it and give it a shot. And there will always be people who say, yeah, right, we did that before. I think it was your grandmother that did it. It didn't work. That's when you stop listening. You don't stop loving, but you do stop listening. And you need to develop response sets for that. Now, you have to be humble enough to check that. So you need some people at work that you share your mind with, where you can go to them and say, am I wrong about this? Is this risk worth taking or not? And get counsel. But in the end, you've got to keep your own counsel, even with all of that input, and say, I think we got to go for it. And you're going to have to close your ears and not hear the sock puppet, and not hear the sock puppet's friends out there who confirm that self-doubt. You got to listen. You got to know when not to listen. How many of you have ever had a conversation at work about accountability, holding people accountable? Ever had that conversation? Do you have performance reviews? Raise your hand if your organization evaluates employees. Performance reviews, right? Yeah, we all do that. All right? You got policies on that? You got forms. HR provides them to you. They train people. Got to do this often. Got to be signed. Sometimes the employee has to sign it too. Right? We have accountability systems. That's good. We need accountability systems. They need to be examined and thought through, and they need to be useful. Let me ask you this. Do you have a system of forgiveness? In human life, those two things go together. I hold my children accountable, and I forgive them. In most organizations, serious failure just leads to banishment. You're out of here, because you're not worth investing in. But sometimes human beings really are worth investing in. But it's not enough to say, don't do that again. You got to say, I still trust you. I forgive you. I believe you understand where you went wrong and want to do the right thing. And I'm willing to forgive that and reinstate you. And I will not be thinking about this the next time you take a risk with me. It's forgiveness and restoration. We don't have a language for it even in business. We don't know how to talk about it. You can't afford to fire everybody who deserves it, because we all do once in a while. And that's the human condition. We're all flawed. So I want to take a second right there. There's two practical examples there about how interior work informs exterior work and exterior work informs interior. So I don't know about you, I've fired a lot of people in my life, and I go straight to my workshop before I do it and after I do it. How am I thinking about this? How am I respecting the person's dignity while I love them out of the organization? How am I inviting them to repent and respond in ways that allow me to not just keep them around, but really forgive and reinstate them?